Welcome to Watermark's Church Leadership Podcast, a conversation with church leaders for church leaders. And I'm your host, John McGee. So today I've got just a really brief thought. It's something that I've just seen repeatedly, probably the last 12 months. It's something I've just been looking for. I found it to be true in every size organization, every leader that I've interacted with. And it's this idea of overcorrecting. You see a problem, there's something that needs to be addressed, and rather than simply fixing it, you end up creating an additional problem because you overcorrected. And so if you've ever read Seth Godin, a lot of times what Seth does is he just pays attention to something and he'll write a blog article or two that really brings a lot of clarity. It makes a lot of sense. It's something that you've seen. You just probably weren't paying as much attention, honestly, as Seth is. So I am no Seth Godin, to be very, very clear. But it has something I've just been seeing repeatedly over and over and over again. So I just wanted to talk about that for a few minutes. It's a phrase we've mentioned here on the podcast before, that a pendulum does not stop in the middle when it swings. And so if you've probably immediately have thought of something that would fall into that category. There was a problem, someone went to correct it, and they created an equal or sometimes even worse problem because the pendulum swung so hard to correct that thing. So this happens in businesses, it happens in governments, it happens in families, and it absolutely happens in our personal leadership and in our churches. So I was just kind of making some notes this morning about some different ways that I've seen this this kind of last 12 months, and I'll just kind of rattle some of these off just so, again, you can kind of have this as a mental category to pay attention to. And then hopefully in your own personal leadership, you can learn to kind of spot this and head it off at the pass so that you don't make some of these same mistakes. So I have seen an overreaction when it comes to hiring. And so generally what happens is someone will leave, and there were buckets of things they did well and a few things they did not do very well. And when it comes to then replacing that person, people will tend to focus on the weaknesses of that person. They will hire straight to those weaknesses. And so whatever this person is, they have to be very, very strong in the things that the person that was before them was weak. And so they get the thing that used to drive them crazy, that's fixed. However, they're now missing out on the strengths and capabilities that person before them brought. And a lot of times they'll go, yeah, we solved one problem. I don't have to deal with that anymore. But honestly, I think I would, if I could roll the clock back, I would take those problems for the problems that I have now. And so just be careful whenever you go to hire. Don't have an overreaction. Don't let that pendulum swing back so hard just because you were frustrated or agitated or just got tired of dealing with that issue. So another one is creating rules, and I've seen this one. So what will happen is, an organization is pretty lean. They're moving fast. They get a little bit bigger, and someone kind of violates an unwritten rule. It hasn't had to be talked about. It hasn't really had to be policed. Someone violates it, and now from on high comes these big sweeping moves. There's rules. There's someone now that's got to manage those rules and compliance, and you have to keep talking about them, and then dealing with people who really kind of violate those rules. And so now you've created all this bureaucracy, and candidly, a better solution might have just been to address that issue. And if you're not careful, what will happen is you keep overcorrecting, you overcorrect, and what happens is a place that was really fun to work at, or a team that was really fun to be on, where there was a lot of trust and a lot of movement. Now people are kind of scared that they're going to get tased, that they are going to get kind of smacked with some compliance issue, or now they're going to run afoul of the rules, which is no fun. And you'll lose your best people. The best ideas will no longer come to the surface. And so just make sure, right, if there's an issue, if there is something that needs to be addressed, you address it. If you need to create rules, policies, procedures, as you get bigger, you probably will have to do some of these things, but don't start with rules and bureaucracy, and don't overcorrect when you see something that needs to be addressed like that. So another one is when there is a new leader of the organization. A lot of times what they struggle with is pulling the best parts of the organization forward and distancing themselves from the worst parts. But what happens is a lot of times is a leader comes in and they feel they have to recreate everything completely new. There needs to be new language. There needs to be new vision. There needs to be kind of new rallying calls and strengths that are unique to this person that are leveraged. And a lot of that actually is true. You probably do need many new things. But I've seen the insecurity in leaders. Great news is that that's not TA here, who's stepped into this role as senior pastor here the last few years. But I've seen it repeatedly where a leader just feels this need to completely toss the history of the organization, and they want to overcorrect. Would there be some things that need to be addressed? Well, of course, because humans were leading that church or leading that organization. But I've also seen some very thoughtful leaders this year. I was really encouraged to see a church that was celebrating a big anniversary, and they honored all of the past, and they pulled a thread all the way through some of the things that they were really, really good at, missions and planting churches, and actually weren't afraid to mention some of the things that didn't go well, or some of the people that didn't have some of the best runs, and still just mention them and not try to somehow distance themselves too much. They're part of the family. It wasn't maybe our brightest spot, but I saw a leader who was not racked with insecurity, that he couldn't somehow celebrate that which he was not a part of, and didn't have to overcorrect or just talk about two completely different organizations. He felt like they were a family. He felt like they had a story, and he honored that. And I thought that was just a really, really great way to handle that. I was really encouraged because I've seen some people that I think have overcorrected out of insecurity, and they just want to create something brand new rather than honoring the past, rather than pulling the best parts forward. So another one is changing models or strategies. And this is one I really wanted to talk about. So especially young leaders, if you're listening to me, you will have a tendency to go to a conference, to read a book, to listen to a podcast, to have a cup of coffee with someone who has a solution to your problem, or they've got a way to kind of maximize this thing that you intuitively understand is an opportunity. And so they will give you 30 minutes. They will give you a talk. They will give you a 200-page book that will lay out the best parts of their thinking, the best parts of their strategy. And I remember as a young man just going, well, that sounds amazing, until I'd heard about 5 or 6 different models that all talked about how they were so perfect. And what I realized was there are follow-up conversations, there's follow-up questions that could be asked that would expose kind of the dark side of that model or that strategy. And so you've probably heard us say it several times. There's no solutions. There's only trade-offs. There's no perfect models. You get to pick your problems. And so whenever you come around something that really feels like new, novel, bulletproof, you need to train yourself to know it probably isn't. And if you're leading others, you want to thoughtfully listen to these ideas, to these strategies, to these plans. And I will just tell you that I think the healthiest organizations that I've seen, they do not 100% hitch their wagon to one idea, to one person, to one model. They have kind of thought through their own gifts, their own unique place in their city and this season, and they pull from other things that are healthy, other things that are throwing off fruit, other places where God is moving, and they cobble that together in a consistent and kind of coherent model that makes sense for them. They don't wholesale buy something. And I would tell you that when I see churches, when I see leaders wholesale buy a model like top to bottom, a couple things happen. One, they end up either having to defend that model. They spend a lot of calories defending it against other models. They just get in fights about models, which is such a waste of energy. Or when there is something that doesn't work or is not as advertised, often is the case, then they have to wholesale change something again. And so just remember, when it comes to changing models, strategies, plans, be really, really careful to not let that pendulum swing way past center and create, again, some other problem that you didn't intend to. So another one I've seen is when people associate bad behavior or ineffectiveness based on size. So meaning maybe the size of the church or maybe the size of the organization. Something didn't work as they had hoped in the past. And so they think their church either isn't big enough or it is too big, and that somehow there's some kind of moral value in the actual size of the church as it is. And I would just tell you, I don't think that is generally the case. And probably the problem had nothing to do with size and everything to do with a lack of clarity or a lack of unity or just some sin that needed to be addressed or some hard calls that needed to be made. It really wasn't about the size. And I've just seen churches just swing wildly. I mean, maybe someone leaves that church to go plant a church and they say, hey, whatever we do, we won't be that. And they're reacting to the size, not the heart, not the character of the organization. A lot of times I think it's just an issue of sin that needs to be addressed. It is not a numerical issue. So 2 more. One is laziness. And this is one, I put this on here because I resonate with this. It is easier at times to change things up, to let the pendulum swing, than it is to stay the course, right? It is hard to get a group of people to walk in a long obedience in the same direction. It's also not as fun, candidly, sometimes. It's way more fun to stand in front of a whiteboard and say, this isn't working the way we wish. Let's blow the whole thing up and let's start again. And I've just seen some organizations that were really doing well, and when they bumped up against some type of barrier, rather than doing the really, really hard work to address it, they just abandoned ship and they picked a new model, which meant that the next time they hit a wall, they had to pick a new model. And friends, a lot of times we overcorrect out of laziness. It's just easier to put a new PDF together and shop it to our elders and to our leadership teams or to our board and say, this is the new improved plan. When reality, a lot of times we just need to make some smaller tweaks and stay the course, address the things that need to be addressed. And then, finally, you probably have some examples of this, but just theologically, as we grow, as we learn, a lot of times we realize, there's something that could be said differently. Maybe we have over or underemphasized something, and you tend to just kind of throw the proverbial baby out with the bathwater. And the wise leaders that I have seen, when they come up against something, they go, I might have changed my view on that. They do so with a lot of wisdom, a lot of patience. They don't whipsaw their congregants, and they work it out themselves, and they work it out slowly with other people rather than just completely chunking their theological kind of convictions or their stream in which they came from. So friends, that's a list of 7 ways I've seen it play out, kind of this last year. And I will stick to that phrase. When pendulums swing, they tend to not stop in the middle. And so as a leader, part of growing in our wisdom, part of growing in our ability to kind of lead others is understanding that we need to make bold moves. So not advocating that we don't have a bias towards action, that we don't make bold, hard moves. It's just that we do so thoughtfully, right? We are thoughtful. We think and we pray things all the way through. We ask others for their opinions, and we make sure that our ego isn't driving any of these big changes. That we don't do something because it will make us look better if we pull it off, or it will make us look better if we just distance ourselves from what someone else does. And we can just take great comfort in James 1:5 that, man, if we lack wisdom, right, we just ask God and he gives it to us. And I love the phrase, generously. God will give us wisdom generously as we love others, as we lead his church, as we try to do good in the world. He's going to give you wisdom. So, friends, that's just something I've been observing. I had a few minutes today, and I wanted to share that with you. And so don't overcorrect. Think about a heart of wisdom. Think about long obedience in the same direction, and look for your own ways that you tend to overcorrect or overreact, and keep learning and keep honing your craft and keep serving others. So, friends, thanks so much for your attention today. If we can help you, if we can serve you in any way, we'd love to. If you've got ideas for future podcasts, we would love to know. You can always reach us at clp@watermark.org. That's clp@watermark.org. We'll talk to you again next time.